Hello, happy afternoon, happy Saturday. Okay, so today we are doing Momo the Mouse from Mrs. Quilty. So I'm going to go ahead and YouTube doesn't let me put the links in the description yet, but I'm going to see if it'll let me put it in the comments. So, hold on. What am I doing wrong? Whew. All right. So let's get you. I am not. So I'm gonna. While I'm doing this, I am going to go ahead and tell you I am not sponsored by Mrs. Quilty in any way. I'm not getting paid by Mrs. Quilty in any way. It's just a pattern that I wanted to do. So there's the link to the pattern, and I'll go ahead and show you the fabric I'm using. It is not. It's not anything like super special or fancy. It is some fleece material that I got from Walmart in the light pink color. And then for the accent piece, the feet, the center of the ears, I'm using a cotton. It's very similar in color, but it is different also, but it's got a difference in texture. Really, it's only important if you like it. So these patterns are actually made to be done in a fleece, in like quilting cotton material, and I'm doing them out of fleece. So we'll see how that goes. So I really like it when I make them out of fleece. I do interface them though, so they don't have the stretch. I just like the way it looks. And this one I'm making the way I am because I'm gonna give it to my mom because she's like super obsessed with this. Like, it's an AI cartoony type of mouse. She sends me videos every morning, so we're so I'm making it for her. It's not gonna be exactly the same, but it'll be fun enough. So let me see if I can get that up, get the directions up. All right. So first things first, first impressions per usual. So first impressions of the patterns. So Mrs. Quilty, they're like, I'd seen mixed reviews, but most of the complaints I have are people on the instructions, and I'm pretty experienced with sewing in general, but with plush sewing I do a lot of that as well. So, and it does say that it's 2 out of 3 needles, so it's like an intermediate level. So I could see how the instructions might seem maybe a little confusing for a beginner. But I did buy both the bundles, so I have all of like almost all the patterns for the plushes that I'm going to start going through. But we're starting with this one. So first, right off the bat, the one thing I do like, if you look at the picture on the pattern, like it's got like a star-shaped tummy. It's like a quilted pattern design. I do most of my plush work is for like, I like doing plush backpacks and bags, but then it's also for memory bears. And so we don't do a lot of like the quilted designs, mostly because you really want to make sure that you're sharing the integrity of the clothing so it's recognizable to the person that's, you want enough pieces to make it an identifiable animal, but not so many that you take out the details of the clothing. So the thing I do like right off the bat for Mrs. Quilty is the belly pattern where that star is. It comes in both forms. So this is what it will look like at the end. There's a little diagram for how to put them in order, and so these are the pieces to do it in that quilted diagram. If you don't want to do it quilted, I am not. They do also have it in a solid piece, so you can do a single piece as well. So I do like that. So you have both options. I did print both options first so I can show you, but also, I don't know, someday I might want the quilted version. We'll see. I do print these on cardstock. You can also print them on regular paper. I've seen people, the ones I use all the time, like my memory bear patterns and stuff, I have actually cut out of those like clear flexible cutting boards. They're like hard for tracing around and stuff. So that's what I've done. And that worked for me for things I use a lot. This one I just did out of cardstock, so I don't know if I'm going to make this one a lot. I just know I'm going to make it right now. So we start with the ears. We're going to get right into the pattern here. I have safety eyes. It does call for buttons for eyes. I have buttons also. So we're going to see what we like best. It doesn't have any marks on the pattern piece for where the eyes go. So we'll have to see how that plays out. So this is the first time I'm doing this pattern. So I'm literally doing it along here. So we're just going to start. So the pattern starts with the ears. So the ear pieces come, I don't always show the pattern pieces because I'm not supposed to show it so you can buy the pattern to use it type of thing. Because it's illegal to like try to give it away for free. But I will show you this. So the ears, this is the front of the ear and it's going to have a centerpiece. So, and then this is the inner ear and they have it so you cut out and then you sew the piece in so they're like attached and sewn in with the seam allowance and everything. I have chosen to change it so I am doing the center as an applique instead. If you're going to do that, you need to make sure that you remove, so that's what this green circle is. I measured out for the seam allowance. So when I did cut out the piece I'm going to applique on, I only did it inside the green circle because that's where the seam allowance would have taken it down to make sure I still get the finished sizing that I want. And then I put on some fusing in there, and then the ears are supposed to go on batting. I'm using fleece, so I don't know how well that might get a little thick on us, but I did use a little bit of a thinner batting, so maybe that will help. But I'm going to go ahead and applique stitch on the ear centers real quick, and I'm just going to do a straight stitch. I'm not going to do a zigzag. It, like I said, I did put in some fusing bond in there. So it is stuck down very, very well. I may go in later and do some hand stitching detail for fun, but we'll see. For now, I just wanted to see what the, because I keep seeing the ads for these patterns, and of course they're adorable. And if you like sewing plushes, especially like memory animals or quilt animals or color block or anything like that, then you probably thought they were cute also. And I know there had been some controversy in the past over AI images. And to be honest, like back then I did notice the pictures, but I never purchased them. I never wanted them. I'm not like, I don't know, when you could tell they're just like that cheesy fake. But then when they changed it, I was like, okay, so the pictures do still look edited, but they don't look like fully AI. So I thought, you know what, I'll give them a go and we'll see how they look. And my stitches fell off the center here for a little spot, so I'm going to have to go back and add a few more stitches. So instead of back stitching, what I did was I just pull the tails to the back and then I tie a knot. So it just finishes it without a bunch of extra stitches. That is purely a personal choice. However, the downside of using a color on color choice means that sometimes in the light, I just plain old didn't see the difference and I just went right off just for that little tiny second. So all you do is you just pull the bottom thread and it should pull the top thread up. You just do this and then you can tie it in a knot and you're good to go. I do this a lot when I'm stitching like leathers and vinyls too, so you don't have to put a bunch of extra stitches in. Just gives a nice cleaner look. So we'll pull, and then I just have the other ear to do. And I'm going to do something just a little bit different because I am kind of concerned about the bulk that I'm causing here because I am using fleece on top of This, I'm going to actually trim this down, I think, and then so that it isn't in the seam allowance. Yeah, I think I am. Because I am a little concerned about how that's going to fit. Because this machine, it is a really good machine. I do like it. And it does a pretty good job. But the last time I made, if you saw my chameleon video, and you can go back and look if you'd like, at the end when I was trying to put the last line of stitch in to put the final piece together, it did not like working with all the layers of fleece that I was using. So I don't think it really liked all those layers. So I'm just going to trim this, and then the back earpiece, I'm going to quilt a couple lines through it so it stays in place, and I'm just going to change it up just a touch so it looks the way I want. So I'm going to do this now before I get around so that it doesn't get tangled up in my needle. And then also, I have had it, and it sounds strange, but I have had it where I've actually sewn through the thread, like it hit just right, and then you can't pull it through anymore, and it just turns into a mess. So it sounds weird when you say it, because people are like, it's like kind of small. Yeah, but it's happened. So I was just trying to make sure I pull my tail through first before I get around, because then at least it's all the way in the back already, and I can still tie everything off. So then we're going to just tie all 4 of them together. Just like that. Come on. And voila. So the batting is really supposed to help give it a little bit of structure and a little bit of loftiness, so you're not stuffing the ears. So it's still got like a flat mouse ear shape without being like stuffed. So that's why they use batting for it, which is a good idea. I don't know, maybe we can do it with just the one down. Did I flip off the edge here too? Goodness. Well, note to self, don't use color on color designs. Okay. It doesn't have to be perfect when it's handmade, but if I know I can do better, I do. I do have to be careful though, because I do get into points where it's, a point where you're like really like just getting too perfectionist on it, and then it ends up just making it worse, or you just are so frustrated with the project because it's not working the way you think it should. All right. So, okay. Maybe I can do it with just the one layer trim down. We'll see how that looks. There's little start and stop lines, so I'm just going to pin those so I know where those are. And that's so that we can turn it, and then it's also going to attach it to the head. And then maybe we'll just trim the batting where it's attached to the head at, and then we can maybe just get away with doing it that way. I did finish the chameleon, if you saw. any of my follow-up videos. I did end up finishing it, but I had to get on one of my big machines to do it, my industrial. Oh yeah, she is not like this. See what happens. Alright, well, it stitched okay, so just trim it down. And then you cut notches in it, but do not cut into the stitch line. Just want to slit the seam allowance. All right, now moment of truth. Let's see how it looks. So the other thing that I somehow always never take into, not never, but when you're changing a pattern from using a cotton fabric to a thicker fabric like a fleece or anything thicker, the opening sometimes is not as friendly to try to turn through. So if you can change the opening size, that's probably best. Something like this, the opening size is actually where it's attached to the head, so you need the extra there. So if I make it bigger, I'd have to try to find a way to close that back because it won't fit into the rest of the pattern properly. But sometimes if you're just really patient, sometimes you can get it to go. Okay, so I am going to trim away this little piece here. So this is from the opening. So I'm just going to trim that away so that when I'm attaching it to the head, we're minus the one extra layer. And if you're using a cotton, quilting cotton or anything like that, you wouldn't have to do that part. You would be able to leave yours in just fine, I imagine. So hopefully, I was looking over the pattern and hopefully I don't have the layers I had last time, so I should be able to do the whole deal this time around, but we'll see. So now it's got a nice lofty ear without being stuffed with stuffing. So that's, was one of the good things about them using the batting. I do upholstery, so I always want to call it Dacron. It's batting. There's a difference, but there we go. I'm just trim this a little bit more back. There we go. Just because I know I trimmed the other one a little bit more than that, so I just want to make sure it has a nice even look. Okay. So it will tell you to stay stitch the base stitch the ear onto the batting. I did not do that. There we go. It does make things easier when you're trying to stack everything up, but for this, I'm just going to do this. I do have my sewing machine because I am working with fleece on the longest stitch that it has, which is a 4mm stitch length. But when you work with the thicker fabrics, you want to try to have a longer seam allowance or a longer, longer stitch length. So let's do it. There we go. And then the top piece is, of course, stitched down for when I stitch the ear center. Trim the excess off. Okay, I'm going to trim this while I have it inside out. Or, yeah, inside out. It might just be easier. There we go. So this is where the opening is, and that's just that little extra to help eliminate the bulk for when we're attaching it to the head. When you do the notches, do not do it in the opening because you want all that intact for when you're sewing it. And again, we're not going to go through the seams, just up to. Just be patient. This isn't something you want to like try to do if you're in a rush. You can also, stuff like this, you can use a tube turner if you need to. If your opening is too small, sometimes a tube turner helps. I have some that I use for a lot of other things, but this one is working out okay as long as I have the patience to just push a little here and pull a little there. And my fingers do fit in nicely to push the seams out. There they go, but they should be kind of bouncy like that. And there we go. So we have another ear. So this is the opening, and I had already trimmed the batting away for that one. And then I'm just going to pin this so it stays all lined up before we attach it to the body. So these are our two ears. All right, so ears are done. And now we're going to go pin and sew the face to the forehead. So let's go through. I stack my pieces with the tops so that I could find them. That's the muzzle, forehead, face. Okay. So forehead. And then the face goes like this. Okay, as I finish these pieces, I like to put them in my little bag here that I keep my pattern pieces in so that they don't get lost. Because I am one of those people that I spread out as I do my project and things get lost. So there we go. You can use pins or clips, your choice. For something like this, I prefer pins. It just really helps when you're trying to go around these curves because one is concave and one is, so that they'll fit together when they come out. So to me, they're easier to pin when I'm sewing because I sew over my pins. Cry about it if you want to, but I do. Go slow. You don't speed demon over them. But it helps keep everything perfectly in place while I'm sewing. And I'm not worried about the edge slipping where I pulled my pins because I'm too far away. Then I can focus on pulling the fabrics as I go to make sure nothing's bunching up. And truth be told, I was trained a long time ago, and I worked on formal wear, and I worked on almost everything. But this is how we were trained back in the day, like more years ago than we're gonna talk about. But so it's kind of funny to me now that everybody is there. It's like a very favorite argument to have online, but I sew over mine. It works for me. If you don't want to, you don't have to. But when we're doing these curves, see, because one goes this way and the other goes that way, and when they're sewn together, that's how we get this like domed out little shape. It helps to keep the pieces in place right where I want them. So same with like on clothing, if I'm doing sleeves or anything like that, where it's just two pieces that are curved in opposite directions that you have to sew together. It just holds everything where I want it. Or fabrics that move a lot, like velvets creep really badly. Satins like to slide around on each other. The only difference would be like if you have a really tight stitch length, then going over your pins might be a little dangerous because your stitch length isn't very long. So you're very likely to crack right down on your pins. Okay, so the face is stitched to the forehead. And now we're going to fold it in half and we're going to sew this dart up. This is a very tiny straight stitch, so I'm not going to pin that. You feel free to pin it if you feel you need to. Now, the thing about darts is, and people like just stitch to the end here and they'll just kind of leave it hanging, and then they wonder why they have weird points or small holes, because you have to go all the way to the edge. Unless it says to shape in, which means you like kind of follow the curve a little bit. This one does not. But you'll go all the way to the edge. So that's, you'll see some people complain about weird points or holes because they didn't go all the way to the end. So there's an opening all the way to the edge. Unless the directions tell you to blend it in, which means you'll curve, when you get close, you'll stitch close to the curve to the edge. This one does not, so you'll go all the way to the end. See? And that helps to shape the piece. All right, so that was 6. Now we're on step 7, which is to sew the muzzle. And their pieces are marked with these little cute little hash lines here that are perfect to help place things on. So like this one, there's the center mark, and then the other ones are going to line up with these seams. So they're pretty good, at least for Momo the Mouse. I've looked through all the patterns because that's what I love doing. I love looking through patterns, but I've looked through all my patterns and they all seem to be doing the same. I will find out as I go because, like I said, I plan on sewing all of them. But we'll see. So far, everything seemed to look okay anyway. So we're starting with this one. Come on. So some of mine may, this one may look a little different than how it's intended because, like I said, I'm using a fleece, and these patterns were made for like a quilting cotton. And that does happen if you get one, like if you get a pattern that's made for a thicker fabric, like a lot of bear patterns, like older ones, they're made for like faux furs and thicker, like thicker furry or textured fabrics. Those ones you may, if you're going to use them like as memory bear patterns, there's a lot of people in the groups sometimes that will wonder why their patterns look a little off after they're made. Always test those on like a muslin first, or an old sheet, or whatever you have to use for practicing, because they're not always intended to be made with all fabrics. So So this one was not intended to be made with fleece. So there may be a couple of things that might look a little funky on mine. I'm just trying to make sure I shift everything to avoid any unnecessary puckers or wrinkles. And I think I need to double check something. I think I may have used the wrong seam allowance because it's looking like it's not wanting to lay right. Nope, 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay. What? Duck then. Let's. See. I'm gonna try something here. Yeah, it looks like I don't know. Let's see how this goes here. It looks like I just have too much. Okay. Well, it says I'm using the right seam allowance. Let's see. Maybe because of the fleece, it's not gonna lay right, which happens. But okay. Yeah. There we go. So here's our little face. We may have to adjust the forehead seams as we go, because like I said, I did use the fleece instead, so it might not lay the way that we need. So Nain, we're going to turn this sideways, or turn it upside down, fold it in half, and then we are going to stitch all along here to the end of the muzzle. And just like a dart, you're going to go all the way to the end. All right. And make sure your seams here line up. And according to this, the seam on both sides is going to go towards the front of the nose. And that is purely because that's the way it's going to lay best once it's stuffed. You want it to go so it holds its shape and it's not trying to pull. You know, it sounds like it might not make sense or make a difference, but it totally will after it's done. You'll notice, like, if you stuff it and you notice, like, your seam allowances are pulling different directions, you notice. So this will just help make sure that the shape goes in the way it's supposed to. And again, all the way to the end, just like with a dart. There we go. So here it is. So it does have on here to sew in our eyes now, but the pattern piece itself didn't mark where the eyes were supposed to go. And on here, it just kind of looks like it's going to go right about here. So sure. I'm going to take this. And if you do this while it's folded in half, your stuff is going to line up easier because then you don't have to try to match it from one side to the other. You just have to make sure your pieces are laid out evenly. And then you use something to poke a hole. And here's the thing. So fleece is a woven material, so it's not going to be as big a deal. It's a knitted material. If you're using a woven material like a quilter's cotton or anything like that, you definitely are going to want to poke a hole, not cut a hole. Because if you use an awl, you're mostly just, and then I use a knitting needle to widen the hole to fit the posts in. But if you cut into a woven material, it will start to unravel eventually, especially if your plush gets played with or moved around a lot, handled a lot. It's going to come undone. A knit wouldn't really do that so much, but a woven definitely will. And then if you're poking a hole in it, generally speaking, it ends up just pushing the fibers away. Sometimes you'll break a couple of the threads, but not enough to cause issue. If you cut through it, it will definitely start to unravel if your plush is handled. And if you're making it for yourself, by all means, do whatever you'd like. But if you're making it for someone else, I always like to make things so that even if they should, like, I'll say, this is not a toy, don't play with this, you know. And my mom doesn't have any kids at home. We're all grown. But, like, what if somebody brings their kid over and they start playing with it and, and so I like to make my things so that they're used in several different ways, even if it's a way I don't think they should be used. You know what I mean? So even if I say this isn't a toy, don't play with it, someone might play with it. You don't know. So I like to plan for the worst type of situation. So this is supposed to be turned in, and it doesn't have to be perfect right now because not till we stitch the nose. The nose is a wrap button that's going to go in here. So now we're going to put the ears on. So we're going to take our face. What you talking about, Willis? Okay. And it goes kind of just centered on the opening here, just right in the middle. So this is going to be one of the spots that I get worried about the bulk when I'm sewing. So we might have to grade down some of these seams to be able to make them work. But get in there. But yeah, with my chameleon, and this machine is new to me. I got it for Christmas. So testing its limits are, still happening. But I have another domestic machine. It's a Brother, the computerized quilting machine. And I've had that one for years. And the one before that was the exact same one, but the earlier version of that. Otherwise I have industrial machines. So So if it doesn't fit on here, I can finish it on one of my big machines if I need to. The only problem is the way that my shop is set up right now, my big machine, there's like so few outlets over there. I can't run my stuff, and I can't go live from my phone, just the laptop, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that, except I don't have enough outlets over there, and it's kind of an older building. Not kind of, it just is an older building. So here's our mouse head so far. So it's an older building, so it's kind of afraid to start trying to overload things. All right, so we're on to that was step 10. We are on to step 11 now, where it says to sew the darts in the back of the head. Back of the head. And then join them together. So, actually, you know what? I'm going to join them together before I do the darts, just so that I make sure I don't get the sides I need to join together mixed up, because that would be bad. So D to E is, see, this side here. So this is pretty much just a flat straight stitch. Well, it's got a small curve, but it's just there's no like extra funky things here. However, like I said, I'm using fleece and it will shift around on itself. So I am going to just put a couple pins in to hold it still. You can pin it, don't pin it. That is completely up to you. I am not your mother, so. Unless you're one of my kids, in which case you can still do what you want because you're grown. All right, so now we're going to cut the darts. Or not cut, sew, sorry. So we're going to go, and so this one's curved, so it's going to seem weird when I say go all the way to the edge. It is still going to have a bit of a curve to it. I do find it best sometimes if I put the point of the dart towards the back of the machine, because then you're following the edge of the presser foot here. You're not focusing on where this is going quite as much. To me, it might not sound like it makes sense, but to me, sometimes it's just easier to make sure that I'm following the angle of that flow there. See, I can show you maybe if it shows up on camera, right? So if it's focusing, so you see how it has that curve to it, and that's just the shape of the cut, but you have to follow it all the way to the edge. So if I place it back, my presser foot's writing against this, so I'm focusing on this and not when it comes out trying to make sure that I'm staying even. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I get it to, in my mind, that is the best way for me to do it. Just to make sure that that shape is going to follow through, especially since it's on both sides, it'll stay even. I don't have to worry about whether they look the same or not. We don't have nipples on the back of the head, basically. Uneven ones at that, right? All right, so there's the back of the head. Now down to step 12, we're going to do the front and the back together. What do you know? All right. So I always start with pinning together the seams to make sure they're going to stay matched up. And of course the tops and bottoms. Make sure the ears are both in. And then as you're going around and pinning, make sure that the ears are out of the way, kind of thing. So you're going to have to go all the way around, but you want to make sure that they're, because they kind of will wave back and forth a little bit. So just make sure that they're, tucked in and out of the way, so you're not going to get the ear sewn in kind of tilted and like the side of it stuck into the seam. So just kind of take your time and mush things around, make sure they're fitting in, because This is where it's kind of awkward because things are in there and it's kind of like a oddly stuffed pillow that you're trying to sew around. And then this is where the ear meets up. So I'm going to I like to put one on each side because then it kind of helps to just kind of keep it in place. So when you're sewing around and moving the pieces, it doesn't have a chance to shift into your space there. And if that doesn't make sense, let me know if you need a different explanation. But to be honest, that's the best way I know to explain it. So here we go. Here we go. You might have to finagle a little bit, get things situated. Because you can't just like leave everything all bowled out when you're sewing it. One side has to get pushed in so it lays down to go through. So kind of figure out which way is going to work best for you to still be able to manage moving it around in the machine. All right, there we go. Just make sure things aren't shifting around. This is the part I'm worried about, is getting over these ears, so we'll see how this goes. Because again, I am using fleece. So just go slow. There we go. We're going to check it and make sure it's stitched because it did not like stitching for the chameleon. So, okay. Okay, so it looks like everything's stitched. I am going to put in another row of stitching just on the top here because it looks like I got close to the edge, and I'm sure that's because the ears are pushing because it's thicker, so it's like trying to pull its way out from underneath the presser foot. So I'm just going to go through with another row because I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but it got kind of close. So we're going to just do it again. And we don't have to do the whole thing. We just kind of start from where we know it's lined up. And again, just take it slow. Since it did stitch, we don't need all the pins in there. I just need to move it through. And don't push it. Just help guide it and make sure it's not pulling out like it did the last time. That, and with the extra bulk, it's nice to put in an extra row, especially if you do this as a business and you're sewing on a domestic machine. I personally, if I use my domestic machine to sew any kind of plush, especially because it's like the memory bears with like t-shirts and stuff, they don't work very well on the big industrial machine because it's just too big. But if you're using, I personally always do 2 layered, like I'll stitch everything twice just to get that extra thickness into it. Because the thread that the domestic machines can handle isn't the big industrial thread that I use on my big machines. So here we go. So these seem a little floppy now, but once you stuff it, it'll have structure underneath it to hold it. But you guys, this is turning out to be bigger than I thought it was. I mean, like, I know it says it's 14 inches tall, but like it's a mouse. So in my head, I didn't really think it was going to be so big, but This is the head. So, all right. So now we're down to step 13. We're going to start on the body pieces. Let me put this away before I lose it. Ugh. Okay, so we're going to start with the arm. And the arm is like this kind of weird two-piece. It's like two pieces in one in my mind. So it's the front and the back together. But the way it's attached, we have front and back cut out. So you'll see when it goes into the body. But so what we're going to do is they're each going to get folded in half. And you're going to have to, again, finagle it because you go all the way to the edge here and around, but we have to pull it to line it up. I know it looks weird, but once it's like in the mouse, it'll be the way it's supposed to be. So go ahead and start pinning that. All right. So while I'm doing this, I'm going to tell you about a Miss Quilty challenge that I accidentally put myself into. If you follow my Substack, you've read my blog post about this challenge. So I'm just going to talk about it. And if you do follow, maybe there's more details. So I was chatting with a couple of crafty friends and, having a couple glasses of wine because why not? It was nighttime and we were off the clock. Anyway, I don't need to justify that. So we were chatting and I was talking about how I had, we were talking about how I had bought the pattern bundles from Miss Quilty. And, they had read the same reviews I did. And so everyone's like, oh, finally a guinea pig to let us know how they are. Because nobody wants to waste money if they don't know they're going to like it, especially when there's such mixed reviews. And I belong to quite a few like plush sewing and, memory bear type groups. So there's some people that are very, very cliquey and very dedicated to their pattern designers. Like there are some people that will only use Funky Friends Factory. If you know who they are, they do like the Melody Bear, which is very adorable. I'm not saying that it's not, but they're very dedicated to that one designer. Same with, just other designers. Choli Nights is really good. I love Choli Nights, but I mean, she does a lot of like more anime Chibli, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, style things. And it's very, very fantastic and beautiful and adorable. And I have a lot of her patterns, but it's not the only thing I make. Okay. And so we were talking about it. And so here's me and my big mouth because I like to make plush bags. And I was like, I could turn any pattern into a purse. And they're like, what? And I said, yeah. I said, I could make a purse out of every single one of them. I was getting cocky, okay? I had some wine, right? It was just a couple of glasses, but still. And so we made up this like little friendly challenge where if I have both bundles. So both bundles is 29 patterns. Each bundle says 14 patterns, but one of them is actually 15 because it gives you a teddy bear. It's like a boy and a girl teddy bear. I guess you could, for lack of a better way of explaining, it's got one teddy bear in a vest and one in a dress. The bear pattern itself is basically the same. So I guess it is only 14, but it comes separately as 15 because it has the dress and the vest in each of their little outfit. So it's technically 29 patterns. So I was like, oh, so then I was like, I'll do all of them. So now by the end of the year, and because I had been complaining, I have so much fabric. I don't have just a lot of fabric. I have so much fabric. So we went through and here are the rules. By the end of the year, so I have 6.5 months to do all 29 of these patterns. And then the main fabric has to be something I already have in my shop. So I can't order fabric for, I mean, I can if I want to make extras, but for this challenge, they have to be made out of one of the numerous stockpiles of pieces of fabric that I already have. And so, but I can change the size because I like to hack the patterns to make them into bags. So I can change the size. I can put on any personality I want. So if I want it to be like a cute, friendly looking little creature, if I want it to be more voodoo doll gothy type, whatever. Personality is up to me. Style of bag is up to me. So they don't all have to be backpacks. They don't all have to be handbags. So, so as long as it's a bag of some sort. So, so then while I'm agreeing to this, and I'm still to this day, I'm excited. So, and I've already started working on some design features and prepping some things up. But while I was going through, I'm like, 29 is such a weird number, like 29. So I went on to MissQuilty.com and I bought the patchwork kitty sewing pattern as well. So it's an even 30 now. Which I actually, once I saw it immediately, I went, that's a sling bag. I don't know why. I just did. So I bought it and it's already like the pattern is already prepped out the way I need to. So now I'm just choosing which fabric to put on it. So, all right. So step 14, we're going to close up this little dart in the back of the arms. So that is the challenge. So I will be putting on more Miss Quilty things, but they won't specifically be fully to the instructions. So this one is to the instructions, obviously. But as big as this one is, I think I might be able to do my bag challenge with the exact size that it is. I don't think I'll have to change the size of this thing at all. But I have some really exciting designs going on with that, so hold on to your butts for that one. Okay. All right, so we got the darts closed up. Now we got to turn the arms right side out. So yeah, so this one I still had to make because my mom is super obsessed with that mouse. I don't even remember what it's called, the berry mouse, something. I don't know, it dances and sings and whatever. So anyway, I thought this would be fun because I'm going to see her for 4th of July. So we're going to take this with. So here are the arms. And then step 15, pin arms to body, aligning marks O, P, O, and R. So this is the body. Body. Okay. Hold on. So this is P. P. Okay. So we're going to sew this inset here. Oy. Except I'm doing it the wrong way. No. Okay. Trying to make sure the curve goes the right way. There we go. So it's, because I think this is the tummy side. Yep, this is the back. So we want it to curve towards the front. So not entirely sure how this is going to fit in the machine like this, but okie dokie. It's a little tight. Okay, hold on. Okay, so I am not entirely sure how this is going to fit, but we are going to give it our best. So this little hole goes through. I'm thinking this might be a good opportunity to talk about hand basting. We'll see how it goes first. Okay. So we're just going to do this couple stitches and adjust, couple stitches and adjust. If you're going to adjust, always make sure your needle is down. That will just give you a better, you can move better without it like pulling out of the machine. Okay. Make sure it's not getting caught on the back of your presser foot. Okay. All right. Double check, make sure our seams are good on both sides, nothing slipped out. It's especially important because this is a plush animal. So once you start stuffing it, you can sometimes find holes you didn't realize was there. So I like to check my seams, especially when it's like something like this where it's kind of in a complicated way. All right, so we're going to do the other one real quick. And it's not, if you find any, it's not the end of the world. You can hand stitch them shut usually. It's not usually critical. Come on. Getting them lined up in this little curve might be a bit of a challenge at times, but all right. So we're going to stitch this little arm on. And then while we have the body piece, I will prep the back, and I'll show you what that means, so that it's going to help a little bit during hand stitching at the end when you're closing it the back up. Because I'll look again, but I don't think the instructions call for zigzagging your fabric edges. But I have found that it just makes it easier sometimes because it's getting a lot of motion and pulling while you're stuffing. So I'll double check, but I don't think it says to. But it is something I have found very, very useful. And maybe you don't want to, but and you don't have to. Just gonna tell you what works for me and go from there. And we may need a new bobbin soon, it looks like. All right. So it doesn't look like it says it. Maybe it does further down and I just didn't see it. But this is the back piece. And so there's an opening from here to here so that you can stuff it. I'm going to zigzag stitch over this whole thing because if this was a woven fabric, it would just help so it doesn't fray while I'm stuffing it because your hands are going in and out to a lot of friction. However, this is interfaced. It's fleece, but it's interfaced. So first of all, it'll help make sure everything holds its shape is what the interfacing is for. But interfacing sometimes can come detached when you're stuffing these because it's getting a lot of activity in and out, in and out, in and out. So it's a lot of friction. So it can start to pull on the edge. So I will zigzag stitch over it. So it will, it'll kind of help hold together so that while we're going in and out, it's going to make sure that those things aren't separating. It would help if I were to. Like I said, this isn't a necessary step. It is just what I like to do. And I just do the whole back opening. I don't even mess with trying to figure out, is it this far or this far? I just do the whole thing. Voila. It doesn't take that long at all to add that. And it doesn't have to be like, applique pretty, where it's like specific stuff. So it just literally is going to make sure that these edges are sealed, especially if it's a woven. It's not going to get unraveled at all. It's going to make sure your interfacing stays on there, even with the friction. There's not going to be any pulling on the edge. And then when you're sewing it also, it naturally will help give you a guideline for your sewing when you're sewing it shut. So I use the widest stitch, which is about 1/4 of an inch, which is what your seam allowance is. So when I'm hand sewing it shut, it's got just a natural guideline for sewing it shut. So it makes sure that your stitch line stays even. So, all right. So next, step 16 is to sew the pieces together on this little itty bitty tab. It says marks H to I, which is this part to this part. This is just a little tiny piece, so I'm not going to pin it together, but you totally can if you want to. So there we go. So this is the front. It's where the belly goes. So it says, if you've chosen option 2, which is the belly without the star, which is what we're doing, you're going to skip the next steps and go all the way to 22. So 17 through 21 are the steps for putting the star together for the quilted tummy. So we're skipping all the way through to 22. So step 21 is putting everything together so it ends up in this shape. And since we are using this, that's why we get to skip all the way to step 22. So pop these in this bag here now that we're done using them. So now it says you're going to sew the belly into the body. Literally all it says. So right sides together, there's a little center mark for where this little piece lines up together. So we'll start with lining up the center. If I don't stab myself. All right. Here we go. And then, okay, so we're only sewing to here. So this is for the leg opening. So we're just sewing this portion of the belly in. Okay, come on. So again, this is one of those curved areas that I will pin and sew with my pins in to make sure it stays in place. And I honestly, I know I keep saying it, but I really can't get over how big this mouse is going to be. I'm actually pretty excited. I don't know why. Maybe just because it says mouse, the measurements didn't really like compute in my head. I'm thinking small because mice are small, but it is turning out to be seeing is believing for this one, I think. This is really changing the perspective on how I want to make a bag, on what I want it to look like. All right, so we're going to stitch this, and we're going to make sure that we are pulling and adjusting fabric as we go to make sure that we don't get any unwanted creases or puckers. It's not a race. Nobody is going to be judging how long it takes you to make this. So take your time. If you have to do a couple stitches at a time to adjust material, you do it. If you need 500 pins, I mean, best wishes to you, but you do it, you know? So you're going to have to do this the way that's going to work best for you. Like I said, even if it's just a couple stitches at a time, you just do it. All right. So the belly is on. Bum, 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 bum. Okay. So step 23 is pin and sew the legs on aligning joints K and J. Oh, okay. So these are the legs. And so it says, get my mouse out of the way, that with the belly, so then these, they look like little whales, will go like this. Okay, so I don't know if you can see this. Let me see if I can move you. So this is the belly and the little whales. So the fat end goes towards the back, and the little dippy side where the whale tail is goes towards the center of the belly on both sides. Sorry, but that's the best way I could explain it. Because I know it's upside down for you, so I apologize. So we're going to attach and sew all the way around. is what it says. So, time to get pinning. I think this is going to be best if we pin it from the back because the legs are going to cup up, which is, because he's a sitting mouse, and the pins are going to fit on the inside. So if we pin from the back, so and then all right, so we're just gonna, so it doesn't look like it goes all the way to the edge of this piece, so we're gonna just start from the end and pin around and see where that ends up. Okay. I really enjoy doing plush sewing. It just, to me, is like putting together a fun puzzle. Although, I do, we all have our favorite patterns. So I have patterns that I've used so much that I don't, I cut them out and then I put the pieces away right away because I know what each piece is. I know how it lays. I know, you just know because you've done it enough. But when it's new, it's exciting and frustrating at the same time because I'm so used to just being able to just go and start and sew and be done that when I'm starting a new one, I'm excited to start the new one, but then also it's like takes me at least 50% longer, depending on the design and the pattern and what it is, to get everything worked out because I can't just pick it up and go and do the stuff. I have to actually read directions and I have to line things up to make sure and double check and okay, I'm gonna sew this one first or I'm gonna stick myself. Okay. So because we've got this, the shape of this, we are gonna have to again be watching how the fabric lays, moving things around to make sure we don't get any puckers or pleats that we don't want. Okay. Yeah, nobody likes a painful prick, and if I try to do both legs pinned up first, I'm going to be poking myself everywhere. Just because of how everything curves and leave these out because I'm going to use them. Double check my seams, make sure everything stayed where it was supposed to. See, so how it comes out like this. So now we'll do the other side. Okay. So yeah, this is my first Mrs. Quilty pattern that I'm sewing. So this, I think, so far, would definitely be able to fall in the range of doing a keepsake animal. Like if someone wanted a memory mouse, I think this pattern would work for that. So far, it seems it's got it's got the pieces to make it shape right, into a mouse, of course. So it's a recognizable shape, but also it's solid enough that you can use elements of a loved one's shirt or pants or whatever, so you would still know what what it was. um so for now, it seems like it would definitely still fall under that if someone wanted one. So that's the thing about doing like keepsake animals. You really have to make sure that the pieces are big enough to still recognize the item of clothing for the person that's getting it, and to be able to include different elements of the outfit, the shirts and stuff. Um, so you don't want to get too small. But this guy looks like he's going to be just right. Okay. So we've got legs. Well, open legs. Okay, let me take that back. Okay. Pin the legs from K to M. And that is here to here. Wait, am I doing this right? Okay. Okay. K to M is just the leg. Are we doing just the leg right now, or are we going up the whole? The picture looks like it's this whole section up here. Here, let's kind of take a look. Because it says pin the legs from mark K to M and sew and clip the seam allowance. So when they say clip the seam allowance, it's this part right here where the foot is going to go, because that has to be clipped to accommodate the foot. But the picture looks like we are definitely sewing this as well, but I don't know if that's true. Oh, no, because this is the dart for the tummy. Okay. Nope, now I'm extra confused because it definitely looks like it. Oi, I'm sorry. Hold on. Nope, it definitely does. So we're gonna go with it. I do own multiple seam rippers if I am wrong, but we're just gonna wing it and stop playing with the mouse. Mouse. So looking through the instructions, I can see how a beginner could get frustrated with them. So, but it does say it's an intermediate pattern. I don't. So I don't know, but I could honestly, I could see, the complaints that I did see were, the mixed reviews. It was mostly complaints about the instructions. So I could definitely see how someone who did not have experience could get frustrated, because I think they do leave out some of the details here. But there are a lot of, not to defend that aspect, but there are a lot of sewing pattern companies that will assume, unless it says beginner friendly or, great for beginners and stuff like that, they will assume that you have a certain amount of experience in what you're sewing. So this is a stuffed animal. So they're going to assume that you have a little bit of experience, and so basics. They don't tell you how to finish edges, like the back edge. They don't really talk about how to finish off certain seams or work with certain darts or how certain shapes will fit into each other. So I can see how somebody who's not quite as experienced in plush sewing can get very confused. And when you're already trying to learn, being confused and frustrated, it already makes it more frustrating. So I can definitely see that. So please just take a deep breath and, try to just take your time. Okay, so now we're just going to clip through the end of the leg here. So the seam allowance is 1/4 inch. So you really only want to clip about 1/8 of an inch all the way around, because the feet bottoms are a circle. So you have to be able to pin this to the circle. Turn around in a circle. So I just use my little snippers so that I can control. If you wanted to, before you stitch all this together, if you wanted to, you could stitch a basting stitch around the edge at about 1/8 of an inch, just so you have a guide as to how deep to clip into, because that's going to be within the seam allowance. You won't see it, and you'll be clipping into that line. So you can do that, especially if you're still learning how to do the feet. It's kind of a good step when you're learning. But we clip it so that see, when it pulls, it separates like that, so it'll lay on the pattern piece nicer. It'll be easier to sew. You won't have any of those unwanted pleats and puckers. I mean, you might still get a couple. Sometimes you get a couple, but it's not going to be near what it is without it. Some people do it without the snips because they like to cut it a different way or sew it a different way. And if that is you, I am so happy for you. That is not me. I will take the time to do the little clips, because it makes me want to cry less. All right, so the feet are circles. The feet I also did in a quilter's cotton, so it's the same shade as the center of the ears. So it's basically the same color as the rest of the mouse. It's just a different texture. To be fair, in the fluorescent lighting of the store, they did look a shade different from each other, but now that I'm here, they don't. It's okay. I do like that it's the texture is different, so it's got like a color on color design type of thing. And apparently I don't have any marks on the other side. So we're gonna wing it. So this one's a circle, so if you don't get it, the front to the front and the back to the back, it's not gonna make that big of a difference. If you work on other animals, they're not perfectly round circles or perfect ovals where it does matter where you place it. Just make sure you follow your marks. But this one, it's a circle. I always still mark them just because it's a good habit to have. Especially, it does really help, like if you have a design in the foot pad, like if you're doing memory bears or anything and you embroider names or dates into the foot pads, or you put patches on there, stuff like that. It's good to know what's tucked, so when you're doing this and things look backwards and they're inside out and upside down, you know exactly which way you're going with what. So it just helps to keep things lined up easier. It just helps prevent headaches later in the project. Okay. Yes, I use a lot of pins. It helps to make sure everything stays in its spot. I'm okay with that. Yes, I'm going to sew over them. Okay. And again, I'm just going to do the one, and then I will pin the other because that's a lot of pins to try to maneuver around and not poke myself. All right. Come on. And around. Ah! Bobbin ran out. Like half the foot. All right. I'm going to pull out some of these just so I can see where I already stitched. There we go. All right. I have another white bobbin, but it's still almost out, so I'd probably still have to finish I still have to make another one before we finish, so I'll just make one. It's fine. I usually try to make sure I have extra ready before I get online, but I was running a little behind this morning, and I did not. So, ooh. Oh, what did we do here? Moved too fast and got the thread caught around the spool. Okay. There we go. kind of the reality of doing things live. You get to see the things that don't, that usually get edited out of videos. All right. All right. Click, click. Okay. And we are back in business. All right. Okay. So we got one foot done. Here's the other one. Ooh. It's actually not bad timing for plush. We're at 1 hour 37 minutes. Especially for a plush I've never sewn before, so I have to take time to read all the directions. But it's not a race. Take your time. Do what you got to do to get it the way you want it to be. All right, so we're just pinning along here. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. Let me know if you have projects you're working on other than this, just anything that you are working on. Let me know. I always like to hear what other people are working on. I'm one of those people, though, like I follow other sewists and other just artists in a lot of different genres, actually. And I'll play their videos while I'm working, like in the background. Kind of just like helps me feel like I have coworkers, I guess. Because sometimes sewing, like I really like it. I love it. Like I love what I do. But sometimes it can feel a little isolating. So it's nice to, like if I watch other people, like listen to other people's videos while I'm working or their vlogs or what have you. It's kind of like there are other people there, but then also it's like, oh yeah, you have the same struggles I have. It's not just a me thing. You know, things like that. It's just nice to always feel like sometimes I'm not alone in like the way I feel about things or the struggles that you have, like either owning a small business or just in sewing in general, or sometimes just in life. But it's always nice to to hear that other people have some of the same experiences, or sometimes you get like really good ideas. They'll be like, oh, this is how I do this, and it's like, oh, I didn't think of that before. And so you can kind of play off each other to improve your own skill sets. All right, so I'm gonna no, are we good? I'm gonna restitch just this little part of the foot. It looks like we got too close to the edge there. So it's always nice to do that. I have one person I watch. Her name is Haley from XOXO Charlie, and I was watching one of her videos about how she makes her labels, and I was like, because I've been trying to make my own, and I don't know, I couldn't find the right material, and I watched hers, and that was it. So, all right, so the feet are sewn in. This one says to put a tail in. I'm not putting the tail in, but this is where you would if you were going to. I'm not, because I know mice have tails, but that's not the look I was going for this. All right, so now we're supposed to sew the back to leave an opening for the stuffing. Oh, wait, hold on. Hold on. Okay, first we have to stitch this, the front here, and then we're going to stitch up the back. So this is where the front of the tummy is here. So this puts all of this together here. Now, if you wanted to, you could leave your opening on the bottom and stitch here. So if you were giving this as a gift or as a memory, like a memory keepsake item, the stitching will be on the bottom and you wouldn't see it. I personally wouldn't do it here because this seam will make it a little harder to sew, but you could. But this one, because I'm doing fleece, it's super easy to stitch shut. In my opinion, I don't have problems with fleece just because it's a little puffy and kind of hides any kind of threads you use to begin with. Again, you don't necessarily have to pin this one, but because I'm using fleece and it likes to move around, I'm going to, because that is the way it works. Okay. Not a lot, just enough to make sure it's going to behave itself. Especially since we have to move it because it's got the legs here and just some things. All right. So again, all the way, because we're doing a dart, all the way to the edge. Okay. I am very excited to see this mouse. All right. And then we're going to do, this is the back. This is the part that we prepped with the zigzag. So we're going to stitch, and then we have to leave an opening for stuffing. So what I like to do to make sure that I don't, because I will get into a headspace where I'll just be going and going, and then I will forget to stop. So what I personally do is I put in 2 pins, and that to me registers, oh, I have to stop. It makes me at least pay attention to what, to look. Once you get into a zone, especially if you have a bigger piece and you're just moving along. And for this one, I want to make sure I can get at least part of my hand through. Maybe not the whole hand, but I have to be able to like reach in because we have all these pieces here, the arms and the legs to stuff. So I want to be able to make sure I can at least get part of my hand in, and then I can also use a chopstick to help push the stuffing along and stuff like that. So there are marks on the body, and it actually, this one leaves a pretty big opening. Some of them don't leave very big openings, but when it comes to the opening, I just always kind of make sure that, first of all, the opening's big enough for the material I'm working with to turn it right side out, but also that my hand will fit, because Otherwise, I have forceps and stuff that I can use, and some people like to do that so that they have less hand stitching to do. I don't mind the hand stitching, to be completely honest with you. But I would rather be able to reach my hand in for the stuffing. But, I mean, you do it the way that's going to work best for you, but that is how it works best for me. All right, so now we have this dart on the bottom to sew up on his bum. Oh. So right here, we're just going to open this up to fold that down. And there we go. And again, I'm just going to be pinning because this is fleece and it likes to move on itself while I'm working with it. So you don't have to pin if you don't want to. Pins or clips, whichever works best for you. But this corner just doesn't want to lay still, so we're going to have to put some pins in there. Okay. Make sure everything's pulled out so you're not getting anything in the seam that shouldn't be there. Okay. So now we have to put the head inside the body and stitch the neckline. So make sure we have the front to the front, and then we're going to curl him up like this. Fold the ears in, I think would be best. If you need to mark, like you could put a little mark on the inside or a clip. I'm just kind of keeping an eye on which way I'm putting things in. We're just going to shove him in there. And then we're just going to start pinning down. I'm going to make sure certain things line up, my front and my back. And this is just to make sure that while I'm pinning, I don't get things shifted and then his head is crooked. Sometimes it looks cute though, like it's okay to have his head tilted or turned a different way if you want. But I prefer not to. If I don't have to. So this is where the arm goes. So we're going to actually stitch right over this. But that's where that opening is there. So this is becoming part of the neck seam there. And I'm putting my pins on the inside because we're going to rotate it through like we did with the arm when we're stitching it. This is a pretty big neck opening, so hopefully we don't have too many issues. Sometimes if they're really narrow, you can only do like 1 or 2 stitches at a time before you're trying to adjust your material, and just takes time. So that's where you would consider doing some hand basting to hold it in place while you're stitching it so you don't have to battle with the pins. There are a few bear patterns that do that to you. But this one is a fairly big opening, so you just have to make sure you line up your front and back and make sure that you're just shifting all the materials around to make sure they're laying flat so that when you go around, you're going to get a nice even seam. You're not going to get any bunching and puckering and whatnots. This side seam matches up with the arm dart. So we can match that in. But just take your time and make sure you just get everything shifted around the way it should be, and you should be good to go. And this is the last part of sewing this, the machine part. Then we'll have to stuff it and hand stitch the opening. But so I have the head and neck pinned together. So now just kind of push it, pull it, move it, gentle. This one, I will a lot of times still stitch over the pins. However, I will be pulling them out after I stitch over them. I stitch over them so they stay in place, especially so there's no shifting, there's no bunching, all the things. But I will start pulling them out as they go through so that it's just less I have to fight with on the machine as they go. See, if it tilts in, it's going to bang around. So I will pull them out as they get stitched over or as they get extremely close, you know, the things. Just stitch and pull and stitch and pull. Before you make adjustments, remember that to make sure your needle is down. You don't want to like yank on it, but it does help make sure it stays in place under the presser foot. Because otherwise your piece will pull right out while you're trying to adjust it. Okay. Alright, so let's pull this out and we're going to check the seam, make sure nothing shifted, bunched, slipped off the edge. I am going to restitch here because we got a little close there. And it actually looks like it, because this arm joint was pulling. So I'm going to stitch that real quick. What am I doing? Here we go. I wonder if it'll fit in here. This is a pretty wide neck hole. Because I can't see it. Ah, there we go. Look at that. It's wide enough to fit like this. See, but it's on the bottom side, so I can't see it when I'm stitching it. Okay, so sewing it like this is not ideal. I wouldn't do the whole thing because the parts of the head are catching on the corners. But just to get this little part done, it worked just fine. Okay. All right, we look like we got everything. So here is the opening. And we're gonna pray to the sewing gods and pull. So I always try to like pull out any attachments because they're like bulk inside. If you can, you don't want to just like start randomly pulling a bunch of things. But then the rest of the head usually follows okay. And then you just start gently rolling parts of it out. And again, this pattern was made for like a quilting cotton type of weight fabric. So my fleece is going to require a little more patience than your quilting cotton probably will. But it's not doing too bad. You just got to be nice and gentle, roll. And if you're going to pull, you just gently pull. You don't want to be tugging and yanking because then you're going to start pulling stitches. And then you can push some of that bulk through. So now we have the legs. So I did not bring a chopstick over with me, but I have a knitting needle. I am going to use the back end though, because this is a smaller point one. So this one pokes holes in things. So I'm going to use the back end and just kind of help push it out. Okay. So here he is, unstuffed. So now we have to stuff him, and then we can put the nose in. And that's because when you're pulling on the nose, you got to have stuffing behind it to reinforce everything. So I'm going to grab a chopstick, though, because that is not going to work for this. Actually, I have a pencil. I'm going to use the back end of that. So I'm going to go ahead and stuff it. But if you didn't want to stick around to finish, that is how it is sewn. So then you're just going to stuff it. You're going to sew the nose on. It's a covered button into the nose spot, and then hand sew the back shut. But if you want to stick around, awesome. We're just going to go, and I'm going to start with the legs and the arms first. And I'm not going to like pack them right now. I just kind of like start getting them in so they start like taking shape. I think I probably do this a little weird compared to how some people do it. But I do like to pack things really tight at the end of the day. So I just kind of start putting some in so it starts to take shape in the limbs. And then I start packing them a little tighter till they're the way that I want. And because this is all one piece, a lot of my stuff is jointed where the legs and the arms are done separate. And then you put them on. So I like button jointing, so they get put on after everything is done and sewn shut. But when I do something that's all in one piece like this, I kind of like to start with the limbs just because I can get them the way that I want and then pack the rest of the body. And it holds the limbs the way they're supposed to be because the stuffing can't get out. So I'll put in a little bit first to get them to hold shape, and then I'll start packing them tighter. And I check back and forth. So I'll make sure like the legs are, packed as tight, so you don't have one that's thicker than the other or firmer than the other, stuff like that. So just kind of get them so everything's kind of taking shape first. And then I'll start. See, this is why I wanted to be able to, like, I don't have to fit my whole hand in, but to reach some of these. And this is where you can use a chopstick. Right now I'm obviously using the back end of a pencil. You don't want anything too sharp because you don't want to poke holes in your project, but chopsticks are very popular here. I buy them in bulk, so I have a ton. Because they do break. Because like I said, I like to pack my stuff really firm. And if you're working on especially bigger projects where you're like putting it in and you're trying to move things around and you're just doing stuff like this, they will break. But they're not very expensive, so I don't really get upset. So I just pull out more. I also use chopsticks for like mixing paint and stuff, so they just are pretty handy all the way around. Okay. So I always recommend pulling your stuffing apart so that it doesn't like, sometimes it can start to clump up. So you just want to make sure so it's not quite as lumpy and bumpy. Okay, so I think our feet and our arms are okay. I don't want them too firm because then it'll be like hugging a rock, but I do want them firm enough that they're going to hold their own shape. Maybe a little bit more, actually. Here, let's put some in the head. So see, I can get everything in, and then once I start filling the rest, I can start going in. And you know what? This could almost, if you change the ears, you could change the nose. It could almost just be a pig, too. There we go. It's a new pattern hack. Turn the mouse into a pig. We could make it work. You wouldn't even have to change the rest, just the nose. Just use a bigger button. It says to use a covered button, but I almost think, no, if I use the other one, it really will look like a pig because it has the holes on it. I'll do the covered one like they say. Okay. So these take a lot more stuffing than you think they will, always. So I always, when I like I get stuffing in bulk because I do a lot of plush work. But I always kind of think when it comes to stuffed animals, like if I was buying to make one, I would just get a 1 pound bag per stuffed animal unless it's like an odd size. But your average plush pattern, I just kind of always figure 1 pound bag, 16 ounces. Per plush. That way, I'm not gonna run out. It really just kind of depends on the animal and his shape, and then again, how firm you like it stuffed. But when I'm doing the math, so even when I'm doing plush, when I'm ordering in bulk, which I do, I will still figure 1 pound per plush. So if I have 10, 10 memory bears, I'll make sure I have at least 10 pounds. I don't always need it all, of course. And again, it depends on the animal. I do several different animals, but they do take more than you think they will. So I always just, when I'm ordering supplies, I always just figure out ordering 1 pound per animal. And that just helps to make sure that I have enough and I'm not going to run out. And then I'm not worried about supplies for each project. But even if you go to the store, I think you can get like a 12-ounce bag, but you can get a 16-ounce on up to, I know Walmart has 10-pound boxes. Okay, doing this pink really, really just keeps giving me the look of a pig in my mind. So I think I might have to remake this as a pig. Don't tell Mrs. Quilty. Okay. So to stuff the snout, I'm going to stuff it, and you want it to like be full. But also I have to keep in mind that this is going to be turned in for the nose. So as I'm doing it, I'm just kind of checking to make sure I can still push. So his head doesn't seem as circular as I thought it should be, but he's still looking pretty cute. But between me and you, he does kind of still look like a pig. But I think now that I said it, I just can't get it out of my mind. And yeah. I just feel like his head isn't quite the shape, but it's not stuffed yet. It's still getting there. Yeah, though, it's more ovally than circular. I mean, I think it's still cute. It's just according to what their final picture. But again, I did use fleece and not quilter's cotton, and even though I did put the interfacing on, sometimes it does shape a little differently. So it could be because of that. Okay. I'm just going to start stuffing the body a bit. Let's see how we like some things. I always kind of like to make sure I'm looking at them before I sew them shut, just to make sure if I have to pull stuffing out and change anything, move anything around, like move the stuffing around. If it's like not firm enough somewhere, you like have to pull parts out to redistribute. I will. Don't try to put in too much at once, because then you will get some clumping. Then your guy just looked lumpy. I mean, his he's looking like he's supposed to. It's the head that's throwing me off here. I mean, if I wanted to, and I might actually, I could just push his sides in and then hand stitch it so it's more round. Like that, like less raccoony shaped and more round. He looks kind of angry. So I might do that just to, because that's what I'm having problems with is the shape of his face. So I might go back and do that. And like I said, it could be because I use fleece, so that could be completely on my choice, but that's fine. I have no problem going back and altering things and fixing things that I feel need to be done. And that's kind of one of the things I love about being able to do this is that they're not that you hardly ever get them to look exactly the same. So like no two plush are going to be the same. Certain materials are going to lay certain ways. So, you kind of learn how to adjust and adapt and then move things the way they should be, or, hand stitch some puckers or some spots that you think should be tighter or shaped differently. Happens a lot when I try to make things out of denim. Not try, I do make them, but when I do things out of denim, they kind of the darts will pucker a little bit, so I'll have to go in and push them and then hand stitch it to curve. And it, like I said, it could be my fabric choice that made it do that. Except because of the shape, it really, really, I can't stop thinking about a pig. Okay, but there we go. And his ears do not want to stay up. So I think I'm going to go and see. I think I'm going to hand stitch them down a little firmer. I'm going to pin it real quick just so we can see it. Because they're flopping and I don't like that. And again, I trimmed the batting off of that, so that could be my fault too. It could just be because I maybe trimmed too far down, and so it might just have less support on that bottom edge. But I think if I just hand stitch around, see, they're not flopping quite as much anymore. So I will do that, and I will hand stitch him shut. And I think I'm going to experiment with his cheeks a little bit. But otherwise, we just have to put in the nose, which I will do. It's a 3/4 inch button that you cover in fabric, and you just put it in like this. That's it. So, but since I'm going to do this other hand stitching, I want to do that before I put the button in to make sure everything's going to be still pulled the right way. Otherwise, we're pulling in funky directions this way. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So be sure to watch my shorts for an update on our finished Momo. And I hope everybody has a fantastic day. Bye-bye. All right. Thanks, everybody. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat. If you have any projects that you want to see made or sewn along, or patterns that you want tested that you don't know, or maybe you're new and you don't know if a pattern is an AI pattern or a real pattern, let me know. I can test things out for you so you don't have to. So have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you.